data in order to be able to say categorically whether or not the fishery is sustainable, he says. Now, Lyle knows the fishery is sustainable, and the amount of data that the fisheries is making people like Lyle collect is increasing more and more and more. And once again, the industry collects a huge amount of data for its capacity, and it should be applauded for what it does, not put down. Industry does not and will not never make enough money to be able to support that research. That's right. Nor should they. The government and universities and so forth need to look at that, because every other industry, they need to contribute, and the industry does contribute. But it's not actually the industry's responsibility. It is the lawmaker's responsibility to create laws to make sure that it's sustainable, and then for the industry to work within those laws. And I think that the Australian coral industry goes way above and beyond its responsibilities, and I think it should be applauded, and I think it does an excellent job. Now, Mr. Squire also sceptical of Doctor's report. Yeah, why wouldn't he be sceptical? Because if Mr. Doctor here is trying to reduce our gumballs, then, you know, we do have to be sceptical of it. Is he working on facts, or is he driven by ideology? He believes the research was conducted at a few sites and says visibility was limited during the dive. Yeah, I bet. So you go to a couple of reefs, make a couple of decisions, but this guy lives it. I wouldn't be trusting Mr. Doctor that might go and do a few trips. You want to trust the people that live and breathe it. They can't say with any level of certainty that it isn't sustainable. They can't say with any level of certainty it is sustainable. Yep. Because the amount of data that we need to show it was sustainable is very high, but the level of data that we need to show it isn't sustainable is evident, because once again, if you can dive on one single atoll for 17 years and see no impact, then they would need a lot more data to show it isn't sustainable. So it's very easy to say you need data to show it is sustainable, but you know what? You'd need more data to show it isn't. Because from everything I can see, everything points to the fact that, by and large, the Australia's coral reef is completely sustainable. Even when the reef is in the midst of a bleaching event, the industry is allowed to continue harvesting coral. Of course, because they don't go to the bleached areas to harvest. The coral reef is absolutely massive. It goes up the length of Queensland. They are only able to fish off a very limited number of reefs. So therefore, if there's a bleaching event in one area, they go to another area that's not bleached. This article is doing its best to make absolutely excellent management look bad. The industry has a voluntary action plan for coral bleaching and says it's careful to minimise its impact on the reef. But the federal government has previously said voluntary efforts are no longer considered adequate. Yes, the industry does have that. And yes, the industry is very concerned about where it collects from. And why would the industry go to a coral bleached area to get coral when it can just go somewhere else that's not bleached? It just doesn't even make sense. They try to make a good point look bad. Discussions between the industry and authorities are ongoing, with harvesters hoping to avoid a total lockout. Absolutely. Now, why would we lock out a potentially very sustainable industry? At worst, they could reduce, which they've recently done anyway, reduce the quotas. Once again, if you want to take one gumball out of there and put it back there, do you think it makes any difference? If there's natural problems and the reef wipes out, do you think having that gumball there is going to make any difference to all the gumballs that are wiped out if there is some sort of natural disaster? This is just scaremongering. The quotas set out for Queensland coral fisheries are strict. Yes, they are very strict. Going over quota or fishing in an area you shouldn't will result in legal consequences. Absolutely, yes, it does, and it should. In 2016, the first ever prosecution for illegal coral harvesting on the Great Barrier Reef since its new rezoning in 2003 occurred in Gladstone against divers working for the coral harvester Ausreef Connections. Yep. A pair of divers had been caught fishing for corals in a green zone where fishing was not permitted. Good. That happened and they got in trouble. Excellent. Since then, there have been 23 prosecutions relating to 10 cases of illegal collection. Excellent. So people are getting in trouble, and you know what? 10 cases. Considering collectors go out every day and do the right thing, the ones doing the wrong thing are getting in trouble, and I think that's great. The most recent case is allegedly illegal coral harvesting involving coral collector Giardini, including its director Jason, who currently holds 5 licenses. The harvester are charged with fishing for coral in the area where practice is prohibited. All right, if Jason gets in trouble, sorry, Jace, if you did the wrong thing, you did the wrong thing. Doctor says cases of illegal harvesting puts the social license of the industry on the line. Yes, I agree with one thing Doctor says. That's why we as an industry must do everything we can to protect what we've got and do it legally. That's why there are groups like the PIAA and we promote sustainability, and we promote legal. It is absolutely not fair to the people that do it legally when there are people that do it illegally. And if they get in trouble, well, that's the risk they take. But you can't say that it is a bad industry because there's a couple of bad people. All the discussions we're having about whether you should allow coral fishing full stop is further tipped forward. These guys are cowboys, and we should get rid of them anytime there is any breaches of compliance, he said. Mr. Squire says that sort of behaviour is disgraceful. Correct. Because Mr. Squire does everything he can to do things legally. And when people do things illegally, not only is it disgraceful, but it risks the good work of people like Mr. Squire. This is just more and more evidence that our industry is something we should be proud of, and the people running our industry have the right intention. This article could easily be rewritten with all the same information, but praising the wonderful work of the Australian coral industry. This gives us an incredibly bad name, particularly when we're putting forward these voluntary initiatives. Yes, the future of the industry, when Doctor says that the Queensland coral fishery has been approved by the federal government department in 2024 for a further 3 years, he was surprised. Why would you be surprised, Doctor? What, because a few people do the wrong thing, and because you can't even prove that what we are doing is not sustainable? So why you'd be surprised when the federal government made a very calculated decision is interesting. You can see that there's evidence of the fisheries impact in this report. What, your report? So he's just backed up his own claim with his own report. But the government disagreed, yes, because you do one report on a reef that you went to, and then you roll it out and decide that that represents the whole industry, when obviously it doesn't. Big surprise, Doctor. But the government disagreed. Of course it disagreed, because you weren't taking everything into consideration. The federal government department and minister says the way coral harvested were operating were not likely to threaten any relevant ecosystem, including but not limited to habitat and biodiversity. Yes, correct. Thank you, Minister. Doctor says the only way to recover the vulnerable species identified in his assessment was to stop harvesting them from affected reefs. Okay, cool. The industry would totally support that, Doctor. If you turn around and tell us what are the species that are vulnerable, the industry itself would regulate its behaviour, because the industry itself cares about the coral reef more than you care about headlines. The federal government department has requested a review of the at-risk coral species to be submitted in August. Yes, and it constantly does that stuff, and that's part of why we are the best fishery, because we look into things and we make decisions on facts, not individual reports. The Government Department of Primary Industry says it has begun to review and will incorporate the findings from Doctor's assessment. Mr. Squire believes current limits on those species are sufficient, and the harvesters will look after the reef. Yes, it is guys like that that care the most, and it is guys like that that will look after the reef. The industry on its own goes about trying to limit the take of those species. Yes, when this guy sees that there's an issue with the species, he will be the one that will stop collecting, because he wants to be able to collect it in the future. The DPI says an updated ecological risk assessment and harvest strategy will be completed. For now, the world's aquarists can still treat themselves to a piece of the Great Barrier Reef right in their living room. Good, just like they should. For Doctor, this presents an irony. Good on you, Doctor. Go looking for other headlines. There's fundamental imperative for both sides of the government to try to restore the reef, he said. Yes, we want to restore it using the industry, and we want to do it on fact, not on scare headlines. There's no point restoring the reef if they're also simultaneously taking more coral out than you can possibly ever put back. Absolutely, but that's not what's happening. When you look at the sheer size of the coral reef and you look at the tiny little bit that's collected, we're talking about gumballs, you gumbo. For Mr. Squire says that's irrelevant because restoration doesn't happen in areas where they harvest. Absolutely. I think everything Lyle and everything from the industry has said in this is excellent. The only thing is the reporter is trying to make it all look bad and trying to use Mr. Doctor Headline Grabber and to make this article look bad, when if you actually look and dissect what it's saying, is actually the industry should be proud of itself. That question of restoring the reef is also making the presumption that the reef is in such a point that it needs restoration. That's right. At the moment, our reef is still in pretty good shape. Our reef is in excellent shape because guys like this do a great job with their sustainable collection. And people that do the wrong thing get in trouble. And Australia should be very, very proud of what is going on in the Great Barrier Reef and the way that we collect. And these people should be very proud of what they're doing. Anyway, so if you read this without having an understanding of the industry and you looked at this grumpy looking fellow, you would think bad things about our industry. But if you actually stop and look at what's being said, the long and short of it is that Australia exports $25 million of a natural resource, but it's done completely sustainable by people that care under a highly regulated system that catches people that are doing the wrong thing. So I think Australia should be very proud of itself. I think the people in this industry, by and large, should be very proud of themselves. And this article should be rewritten to reflect what the people are actually saying. He doesn't look happy. Dumped minister. No wonder he doesn't look happy. All right, well, anyway, dissecting this article and reading all of it, the long and short of it is that we should be very proud of Australia as Australians. We should be proud of what's going on in the Great Barrier Reef. We should continue to do better. We should continue to get data and monitor. And we should keep doing exactly what we're doing because we are leading the world and we should be proud.